Hello and welcome to today's session. What's ahead for virtual events in 2026 and what, most importantly, marketers should be doing about it? I'm Sheree Hulse and I'll be your host for today's session. Before I introduce my esteemed co-presenters, I want to make sure that we're all oriented in the Zoom event experience that we're in today. We are recording today's session so that you can play back the commentary, or if you have to step away to let the dog outside, you can go back and re-listen to that particular session. We also have additional content available for you in the resources area, so feel free to download that now and catch up on it later. And most importantly, we love engaging experiences at Zoom. So it's really important. We love your interaction. I already see the reactions going crazy. I see the chat, and we're going to do our best to try to catch up with it. We also have Q&A enabled. So if you want to make sure that we answer one of your questions, please drop that into the Q&A box that you have there. And like I said, all the panelists, we will try our best to keep on top of the chat. I see everyone coming in with where they're dialing in from today. And the last item is that we have a lot of polls through today's session. So we want to hear from you, get your read on how you're feeling about events in 2026. So keep a lookout for those. They'll pop up on screen for us. So without any further ado, I want to welcome to our virtual stage Matt Heinz, President of Heinz Marketing, and Rajul Shah, General Manager of Zoom Webinars and Events. Matt and Rajul, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so we're excited. The way we're going to structure today's conversation, in addition to all of the audience engagement, we have three sections that will guide us through. The first will be about the evolution in measuring webinars and virtual events. That's my personal favorite topic. How to extend the value of events. We all know so much work goes into creating webinars. How do we get more value out of them? And the last is more on the operations front, thinking about workflows and how to optimize those. So because I'm the host, I get to choose where we start, and we're going to start on measurement. So let's pull up our first poll question. And we want to know from the audience what the primary metric by which you are measuring your event success is. So while we give everyone a moment to answer those questions through the poll, I want to start with a question, Matt. So I want to start with you. And I know we've talked about event measurement many times over the years, but as we sit here in 2026 on the eve of a Super Bowl between our teams, what shifts are you hearing about when it comes to CMOs measuring success in 2026?
Well, there definitely is a move further into the funnel, a move from just looking at sort of the sort of volume at the top, volume meaning who registered, who attended, to what kind of real revenue impact does it have? And there's so many different types of events you can do. You can do some that are focused on prospects, on partners, on customers. So your objectives might be different. But I'm a big fan of ultimately measuring things you can buy a beer with. And so even though it's important to say, look, I want to get as many qualified attendees as I can. I want to get as many people engaged in the content and learning something from it. I need to ultimately see the kind of revenue impact that has. Oftentimes I've sort of said there's sort of a, end of event, 30 days later, and then 60 to 90 days later, sort of measurements. The end of event means, did we get enough people there? Did we get the right people there? 30 days later, you hopefully have qualified enough of the people in there. You've got a sense for what kind of opportunity pipeline you might have. And then 60, 90 days later, depending on your sales cycle, what did we actually close? We have a client that whenever they do events in person and virtual, they have a 10x ROI goal for that. So, and the 10x ROI is 10x on net new pipeline. So if you spend $100 on the event, you want $1,000 in pipeline. And so like everybody's a little different in how they look at it, but ultimately seeing the metrics you can buy a beer with, critically important.
Awesome. And I think we have the results up here now. So Rajul, what are your feelings about the results? I'm not surprised personally to see attendees as the #1 metric. But obviously I think we want to be moved more towards the sales pipeline too.
Yeah, well, I think to your point, attendees is always the top of the funnel, right? And that's kind of the hand raisers and the qualifies, but it's fascinating. So in my role, I get the opportunity to speak with a lot of event marketers, and the ones that actually have a seat at the revenue table all have one thing in common, right? They've stopped celebrating pure registration numbers and started speaking the language of pipeline and revenue. and not just general pipeline, but really targeted pipeline. How many customers in their ICP are showing up? Which target customers and who from those target customers? What customers that are in active sales cycles show up? Not all leads are created equal, right? So for leads to convert to revenue, it's highly critical that it's targeted within the ICP. So the way we kind of have framed it working with our customers is putting the right content in the hands of the right people at the right time, right? That helps drive and influence buying decisions. So again, I think, marketing, yes, first you absolutely want the registrants, then you want the attendees, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to pipeline and revenue, and a lot of people are looking at ROI, to Matt's point, kind of the 10x ROI, whatever that number may be, but it's all related to kind of how much you spend.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm kind of I'm watching the comments here, and I think the commentary is even sometimes more interesting than the data itself coming out of this. I think more than anything, just know your objectives. Like a couple people are like, listen, if I get more of the right people into a room, if I'm just trying to sort of introduce a concept to a market, if I'm trying to get people aware of a problem they did or didn't know that they have, or help them challenge their status quo, the objective might be more awareness and sort of narrative focused, right? And that's okay, but make sure that's known up front. Because if someone afterwards says, well, how much pipeline did we get out of that? If you weren't clear on what the objective was up front, there may be confusion or tension in the organization.
Yeah, and I agree. I was looking at some of the chats as well, right? So agreed. In some cases, the goal is branding and awareness. But at the end of the day, for marketers, it comes down to how much are you driving, right? And so again, to everybody's points, it can take a long time to get to the pipeline stage, but that's really, really critical in general in terms of all the spend, and especially with contracting budgets on the marketing side, it's how do you spend your money in the right places?
Yeah, I think probably a key takeaway for everyone there, and I see Kaylee's point in here about depending on the goal event, is actually just to make sure that you're documenting that before the event happens so that you can communicate internally about what the goal of the event actually is. So if someone comes knocking on your either physical or virtual door asking about the success of the event, you're already prepared to say, well, this was our goal. Here's the metrics we used, and here are the results that we saw. So I think that's one way that everyone on the line can take away to how to kind of rectify that solution to always being asked about results, is making sure that you start out by measuring that at the beginning. So the next question that we have here coming in through the Q&A is about pressure on marketing to prove revenue impact and how it's intensifying. Matt, maybe I'll start with you on that from the CMO perspective.
Did it take us just 9 minutes to have an attribution conversation in this webinar? It's either like time to attribution, time to AI in almost every conversation we have these days. So attribution first, right? Look, I mean, for a lot, I mean, I'm seeing in the chat too, people are right. Like, it can take months to see things come through the pipeline. If you've got sales cycles that are quarters, if not years, we've got federal clients where you're measuring it on Olympic cycles. It's not going to happen right away. And let's also recognize that the events you're doing ideally are part of a body of work of marketing you're doing. It's not just an event. You've got a bunch of other things going. So attributing deals specifically to one event can be a challenge, but I think that's another part of like understanding what you're trying to measure and the impact that has. I think the ability to, and I saw people rightfully putting this in the chat, not just look at attendees and the right attendees, but were they engaged? Were they asking questions? What were the nature of some of their comments? Like, how well are you taking their comments and turning those into intent signals that can customize the follow-up that you do with those people as well? So your ability to actualize the revenue potential from an event as part of that body of work it really comes down to how well you're implementing that integrated strategy and how well you're really leaning in on all the different rich data that you have from people that don't just attend, but maybe they registered and couldn't attend. Maybe something happened. Just because you didn't show up today live doesn't mean you're any less qualified, right? And so I think we miss an opportunity to engage with people that don't show the highest level of intent to get a maximum yield from your event efforts.
I think I'll just add to that. I think it's interesting, right? So events is no longer just a check the box activity, right? It has to be looked as a growth engine. And it's just one piece of that growth engine, right? With budget concentration, fight for people's time, marketing has to have that laser focus approach on how to run events that deliver value and drive outcomes, whatever those outcomes might be, right? And again, in terms of, kind of proving the revenue of it. If it's targeted and that customer has a high propensity to buy, sales will absolutely do the follow-up and convert that lead, right? And so to Matt's point, agreed. Like, are those people just turning up to the webinar and then going to do laundry? Are they answering polls? Are they asking questions? Do they stick around for Q&A? Are they also actually going to just not one of the sessions? Are they going to multiple sessions, right? I think those are all things that, you know, our marketers really need to take a look at, and we continue to do that, and we try to provide data on our side to get that information over to them. And it's really kind of all, you know, connected in terms of the entire kind of demand gen campaign that they run throughout the year.
I really like that point. I think, especially I would say maybe when we were all spending so much time, definitely on webinars in the height of the pandemic, the fact that, you know, I would work with clients who would be looking down on an on-demand attendee. And it is such a missed opportunity when you think that way, because we put so much pressure on ourselves as marketers for Thursday or Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern to run the perfect webinar. And in reality, the marketers have their day jobs as well. And just because you're not able to show up live, that actually, I don't believe is an intent signal. And then I think
the
the
opposite
other
could be true, Sheree. I mean, just because you attended our last 3 webinars doesn't mean you're qualified. It could mean you're bored, right? I mean, I've seen that happen as well. I mean, I'm doing an in-person event next week here in Seattle, and it's a lunch. And there could be people that are coming because they want a nice lunch at a nice restaurant. There could be people that aren't coming. I know there are people that aren't coming that are highly interested in the topic and therefore are great prospects for our sponsor. And so just because they didn't come doesn't mean we should ignore them. I see some people that are talking about workflows and nurtures for the non-attendees, even those that sort of maybe showed a lot of interest, and you can track interest in registration landing pages, even if they didn't sign up, like that's a signal as well. So these are all different threads you can use to maximize not just the event itself, but the broad body of work around the event.
Where's that event? I might come for a free lunch too.
It's at the Met. It's at the Met Grill. Come on down.
Awesome. So before we shift gears to get into our second topic, I want to take CJ's, straining my eyes a little bit here, question. And so he's interested, or she is interested in understanding what people are finding success in to improve show rates. And I know there's a second part of the question, but I want to answer that because I think we all have some strong opinions on how you can improve conversion rates to attendees. So I'll just say attendees, live or on demand. What are the practical tips that you guys have for this?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll give one, right? It's really understanding kind of the attendee journey, right? So how do you, before the actual event takes place, how do you provide some teasers or trailer videos to get people excited about it, right? It's about how you make them feel before the event to get them excited to go to that event. So we've seen a lot of success from some of our customers who do a lot of that, where they kind of breadcrumb it all the way to the actual event, so that the event is like people are super excited about it. They do that, right? I mean, it's the same thing with commercials leading into the Super Bowl, for example, or other things, right? So again, we're starting to see more and more of our customers look at not just point in time during the live event, but before the event as well. And then we'll talk about, I think the second section you mentioned, Sheree, was post-event. But I think that's kind of what we're seeing on the beginning side of the house.
I have 3 words to answer that question to get more people there. One is scarcity. What are some things you can offer people that is really only available to either the live attendees or on-demand attendees? For example, we have 2 assets that we've created for those that are attending this event. For those that you want like checklists that want sort of a more detailed action plan for not only how to repurpose virtual event content, as well as how to follow up with the different sequences of people we talked about. We've got those tools available for you. We'll have those in the follow-up. You could say that you're only going to get those if you attend the live event, or you're only going to get those if you attend the live event and if you sort of access this custom URL that's at the end of the on-demand recording. So scarcity is one way. On our CMO group on Friday mornings, we actually don't record those sessions, right? We don't record them in part because we want people to be able to share things vulnerably with each other, peer to peer. But it also means of saying, listen, we want you to come. So one is scarcity. 2 is access, having access to people live, having access to someone in an interactive way, and then that relates to engagement as well. If you're watching on demand, you can't ask your question, right? If CJ has his or her question next week, they're gonna have to find us somewhere, as opposed to putting it in now and getting that answered in real time. And so I think showing people that the advantage of being there live in a variety of different ways can help notch your numbers up.
I think, Matt, to add to that, sorry, Sheree, to add to that, I think it's interesting, right? We have tons of customers who run multiple sessions within an event, and they'll only give out certain sessions to those people who are attending live, right?
Yeah.
And then the recordings are only for specific other sections or sessions for the on-demand. So you can do it that way as well. We've also even seen where some people allow for, no, you don't even need to sign up, and you can just watch kind of the first 5 minutes. It's almost like the starting point of it. And then if you want to watch more, okay, you need to sign up and do that as well. So I think kind of anything you can do to entice somebody to come is absolutely the way to go.
Awesome. So I'm going to guide us now to the second session that you already started to queue up visual. So we'll pull up our next poll question here. So this is all about extending the life of the event, the value of the content. So what we have up on screen is a poll here about what you do at the end of your session. And of course, there's the caveat, as long as you're recording it, since we did have that point from Matt, and I also see it in the chat, this idea that people might not always record. So while we let everyone go ahead and filter in the results on this, Rajul, what are you thinking about when it comes to this? Like, what are some of the great things you've heard from customers, or maybe even prospects, as they're thinking about how to get the most out of their events today?
Yeah, well, I hope the answer is full post-event content strategy, but my guess is it's probably not, right? Look, I mean, I think, I ask customers all the time. So like, what happens after your webinar, your event, you're done with it? And the common answer is, well, people can just go view it on demand and that's it, right? I kind of use the analogy. It's like spending millions of dollars on shooting, filming, and promoting a movie, and then only showing it once in the theaters without any promotion after the movie premieres, right? For the movie to be successful, PR and marketing need to drive audiences to see the movie after the premiere, drive them to watch the movie multiple times in the theater, and then get others who haven't watched it in the theater to watch it on TV on demand, right? And there's a unique strategy kind of associated with each of those different motions. And I think the same could be said about events. I think the other way, I mentioned kind of, okay, so here we got with the results. Yeah, makes sense. But and the way kind of we help our customers frame that, right, is again thinking about that curated experience before, during, and after the event. It's not just the point in time during the live, it's how do they create that unique experience for each attendee throughout that journey. Look, I've been in this space for a long time. I'm not going to date myself here. But about 5 to 10 years ago, it was 85% of people watching the content live and 15% watching the content on demand. I truly believe that mix shift is changing. The consumer world has already gone to on-demand viewing. We're seeing kind of that business world follow kind of that pattern as well.
So we ran a poll like this on LinkedIn, and I'm going to try to sort of save it so I can put a picture of it into the chat. But we asked people, like, which of these best describes how your company manages and executes follow-up from your virtual event attendees. I'm very proud to say that 58% of our respondents said sales and marketing do it together, right? Wow. That there implies that there is a coordinated plan across sales and marketing. 20% said there is no consistent plan, right? So that is a small number, but that means 1 in 5 respondents just kind of make it up as they go, right? Or worse, like what often happens too often is, whether it's a virtual event or a live event, we put all our effort into that event. And as soon as the event ends, if there isn't a plan, we move on to the next event. We're very good at diverting our lizard brain attention to the next fire drill. But then you lose out on that momentum. You lose out on the opportunity to increase conversion. I mentioned that 10x return on pipeline for that one client of ours. When they leave an event, they are no more than 1 to 1.5%. 1 to 1.5x on pipeline. The vast majority of the pipeline they create that can be attributed at least to an accelerant from that event comes in the follow-up. So that's not just giving people a link, it's not just sending an email, but really being smart and customized in how you follow up with people based on their actions and engagement.
I like that. And that actually ties into a question we have here from Blair. And And so what they say is, our team is very focused on having a hand raiser question at the end of the webinar to ask people to book a meeting with us. But they often get ghosted by the hand raisers. So I wonder if that might be an issue because of the workflow that actually we're asking that person to go on. Like, I wonder if, Blair, if you thought about it more from the perspective of like book the time right then and there with a special link, if you might see better results. Rajul, I know we've talked about that before.
Yeah, 1,000%, right? I mean, I think, being able to Matt's point, right? I go to a webinar, I'm interested in something, and then after the webinar, I go through 17 other things that I have to do, right? Multiple meetings, different topics. So trying to get them right at that point of attack, right, where they're hand raising is really, I think, critical. And again, I think, how do you have that ability to schedule a meeting with the salesperson, or how do you have that ability to schedule that meeting right away? I think is really, really critical and important.
I mean, we've used this trick, and you're all welcome to steal it. Like, if you're doing a webinar that is not like a demo, it's really more of a value add. Like, what I'll do at the end is I'll say, hey, listen, this event has been sponsored by Zoom. They're a great partner of ours. They have a fantastic platform. If you'd like to learn more about how Zoom could potentially help your go-to-market strategy, just answer this poll question, say yes. And we'll have someone follow up with you, right? And we've had people say, like, oh, those are the hot leads, right? These are people that attended. It's a subset of the registrations. It's a subset of the attendees, but it allows people, why not ask the direct question? There are people in the room that, no matter what content we have, are asking about features. Hey, what can you do for us for pricing? Like, let them self-select in. You'll have a lot more people than that become part of your pipeline as you further nurture and engage the audience. But let people raise their hand, for that immediate conversation.
Yeah, I think the other point to Matt's point earlier, right, it is just having a plan, right? So what is the plan, right? What's the SLA for getting somebody from sales to reach out to that hand raiser? Like, how does that typically work? And I think just making sure that there is a plan in place. I think it's fascinating. We spend so much time, even on this one, right? Matt and I, Cherie, went with the team and said, okay, let's come up with a plan for what we're doing. But like, just in general, it's like we spend so much time focusing on the actual live part. The live part's 30 to 45 minutes, right? It's so much more focused on what's going to happen after, right? Who's going to reach out to different people, et cetera, right? I think that's a big part of kind of that overarching event plan that people should be looking at. And I think, it could be different for in-person. It could be different for hybrid. It could be different for virtual, right? There could be a multitude of different motions that go across for each of those. So I think making sure that kind of you have a plan in place in order to get to those people is really important and impactful.
I mean, it's very, very nice that you said we planned well, Rajul. It usually goes out the door when we're keeping up with the Q&A and the chat and everything. So I appreciate everyone hanging on for the ride today. And Matt, we have a question here about the content production bar being set so high. And I'm paraphrasing, so excuse me, Sarah, for doing that. But when we think about the content production being so high for B2B marketers, how can we do it better or more efficiently?
I think the bar is where we put it, right? I think, I do a lot of events, and like when I do events at big companies like Microsoft, they have an enormous studio. They have hair and makeup people, not hair for me, and then they got like wardrobe. They have it's this huge production, and the end result looks great. We're doing this from wherever we are. I'm in my office here in Kirkland, Washington, right? Like, I no hair and makeup today, but I think like we're having a real conversation. The content is still what stands out, right? The insights we get from the polls, the insights from the question, the engagement in the back and forth, right? Like, if we were doing this 10 years ago, we probably would have put together like a big, PowerPoint presentation and spent 45 minutes just lecturing everyone on something with the same insights, with the same content. I think this is more interactive. I think this is more interesting, more engaging. I'm curious what people see, but I don't know. I think we live in a world now where we want to see authenticity. And I think if you just ship something, turn your camera on, like just be who you are and share what you know, I think there's a lot to be said for that. You'll end up shipping more, right? And the more you ship, the more you share, the more you engage with your audience, the more of those signals you'll be able to identify that allow you to further customize and personalize the engagement with your customers and prospects.
I just added that I think there's a balancing act with that, right? I think there's a balancing act between, full show performance versus just something a little bit more authentic, right? And I think there's definitely a time and place for both. Again, I goes back. I'm going to keep using Matt's thing, right? Is what's the plan for the event, right? What's the goal of the event? What's the objectives of the event, right? And what do you think you need? I do think that more and more event platforms do have the ability to not spend a ton of money and still create like television style quality broadcast, right? But at the end of the day, it comes down to the content. Are you getting the right content in the hands of the right people at the right time? And does that content resonate, right? And so I think more and more companies or customers of ours are focusing their efforts on that content versus like hair and makeup, to your point, Matt, and all of those other things that go into it. But I do think there is a time and place for each of those different types of scenarios.
And actually, maybe to that point, I see Vicky, thanks you for saying you like event formats like this. Are there any different types of formats you're seeing right now, Matt? I know from my perspective, we're seeing more panel-based and allowing people to talk with the balance, of course, of high production and presentation. But anything new you've seen lately?
I think the more interactive, the better, right? In terms of bringing more people on. Like, I love an event like this where we can all see the chat, where we can engage with the chat, we can read it, we can respond right in there. I actually love a format where, depending on who's attending, you can actually bring them up as a panelist as well. We do this with the CMO group every Friday morning, which is hosted on Zoom, by the way, where we have everybody engaged, and we will bring people in who have a question, who have a comment, and now they're a panelist as well. So we try to keep it focused and curated, and we don't have a huge production team behind the scenes. It's basically just kind of me, but you can make it interactive, and the idea that someone might be able to like get on the show is actually kind of a big deal to a lot of people. Like, go listen to like sports radio and see how many people call in and how many people text. And then when the host actually mentioned the texture that said whatever, it encourages more people to attend and more people to text, more people to listen and watch your show because they think they might get someone's attention as well. Our lizard brains are wired for that, and you can leverage that to your advantage.
First time, long time, Rajul. Any interesting industry use cases you've seen that might fall out of that?
No, I mean, look, to your point, the interactivity and engagement is critical, right? It shouldn't just be people talking at an audience, right? Obviously, there's a time and place for that, but really, we're seeing kind of that interactivity and engagement. I think somebody else put in the Q&A as well, which I think is a fascinating point. How do you kind of connect if there's a hybrid event, how do you connect the in-person with the virtual, right? And so we have tons of customers, and again, this is not a product pitch, but we have tons of customers using our platform to help with that interactivity between, audience members who are in person versus virtually. So I think there is that. And by the way, it's a curated different experience as well that you're giving to the in-person person versus the virtual person as well. So there's a multitude of things that we're starting to see our customers do, which I think is fascinating, and go from there.
So I'm going to, because we have 45 minutes scheduled for this, hop us on to the last poll question, or excuse me, the last section where we wanted to talk more about the workflow and the operations behind it. And I think we'll probably start to answer some of the questions that I see in the Q&A here, which is like, how do I do this? How do I reduce friction in the operation? So certainly, Matt, we've talked a lot about collaboration drag and MarTech before, and marketers and their use of technology. But any tips on how we should be thinking about it from a webinar perspective today?
Yeah, I mean, strategy first, process second, technology third is kind of my mantra, right? If we go right to the tools, we don't really know what to tell the tools to do. You start with what's our objective? What's the strategy we need to follow to achieve that? How do we develop a set of processes that can actually activate that strategy? And then which of those processes need to be embedded into the tools you have, and which of them just become kind of checklists for the sales team to follow up on, right? Not everything needs to be automated. Not everything should be automated. But if you translate your strategy into a process and workflow, and then figure out how to use technology, that's kind of putting it in its place. But I would really, really encourage the audience to get creative about how you segment that audience. There's a point of diminishing returns on how you do that. And if you're not doing that today, maybe all you're doing is following up with live attendees. Great. Do live attendees and then do those that registered, right? And then maybe take all the people that engaged with your invites, like who was clicking and opening your invites but didn't register, prioritize them for the on-demand and the assets afterward, right? And then there's all the stuff you could do, like the richness of the chat here can be mined by AI immediately to say who's saying keywords that we should follow up with different kinds of messages. So I think thinking that through, and if you haven't done this before, like don't boil the ocean. Pick one or two of those segments and then think about like what's the process for following it. As I mentioned, we will have a pretty specific action plan for everyone after this event that gives you an example of what a segmented follow-up process could be. You'll need to customize that to your event, to your business, to your segmentation strategy and your capacity, quite honestly. But I'm hoping that inspires people to think more broadly about what you can do to increase engagement and ROI from your events.
Very meta, talking about a follow-up strategy and it actually being part of our follow-up strategy.
Yeah, we got to drink our own champagne now, don't we?
Rajul, I know you've been doing some event tech reviews with people lately. Any insights from that relate?
Yeah, look, I mean, I do talk to a lot of customers. I was actually on a call with a customer last week, right, where they walked me through their event stack and they had a tool for registration. They had another tool for email. They had another tool for hosting. They had all kinds of different tools. And I actually literally asked, like, how much time do you spend just making these tools talk to each other? How many resources are needed to pull that off, right? And trust me, it's a lot of time and a lot of resources. It's interesting, most of the friction isn't in running the live event. It's funny, Matt and I continue to talk about before the event, after the event, follow up, ROI. Like the friction isn't in running the actual live part of this event. It's actually pretty easy. And it's really all about kind of the setup, the rehearsals, the planning, the follow-up. Like, how do you do all of that? And I think like making sure that you have kind of a cohesive plan with tools that talk to each other, with integrations, right? That's critical every day, especially in the AI world. See, I had to say AI, Matt, in the AI era, all these tools have to talk to each other, right? That's where the teams can really gain hours and days in terms of making an impact on their business. So I do think it's super critical to focus on those areas that drive the most amount of impact.
And I think the integration point is a really important one, Virgil. I mean, we've seen, research has shown over time, most event technologies, whether it be physical or digital, lags behind other MarTech when it comes to being integrated into the systems of record. And it kept declining, I would say, over the past 5 years too. And it's because of the sprawl of tech that people are using. Of course, the people with the keys to the castle on your marketing automation or Salesforce automation system are sitting there saying, well, I'm not going to let you integrate your 20 event tech tools into this. Like you're going to have to find a better way, or let's be real, people are doing it in Excel. And that's not a perfect match either.
Right. I don't even think it's just event tech, right? It's just your entire technology infrastructure, right? I mean, I'm not going to tell you how many pieces of technology Zoom procures every year, but it's a lot. Let's just put it that way, right? And making sure that all of that talks to each other is really, really important. And especially in the AI era where it's so interconnected in terms of trying to get all the information from one place to the other in a seamless, easy way. I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of how you integrate it across the board.
So just looking at our time here, I think we have time for a few more questions that we can get through. So let me just scroll here. And maybe we'll take this regional question from Alina. Hopefully I have the pronunciation right there. But for Matt and Rajul, do you see any meaningful differences in how webinar engagement or follow-ups should be approached in North America versus in the European region? Anything there?
That is a great question, and I don't know if I have a great answer for it, honestly. I don't know if there's anything geo-specific that we've seen our customers really look into. It's more really kind of focused on what type of event it is. Is it a brand awareness event? Is it just a true lead gen event? Is it thought leadership? As well as, kind of who the target audience is in the ICP. I'm not sure I have the answer to that one, to be totally honest. It's a great question. We can take a look at it with some of our customers.
The only thing I would say is, just one, make sure that you make your events as accessible as possible. So if you're targeting multiple regions, make sure that there's language translation and captions that are available so that it's more accessible to folks. And also just be aware, depending on where you're going, sort of what sort of customs and expectations are. Like if you're doing something in Japan, you're going to want to be a little more formal. You're definitely not going to want to blow your nose like on screen, right? So I mean, there's certain things you just have to be aware of, just culturally, to make sure you're respecting the culture you're working towards.
I think the only thing I would add to that is, and thank you for the question, Alina, is in analyzing all the webinars I've analyzed in my life, it actually isn't region that is the prevailing factor in someone's engagement. It's the industry that they're operating in. But if you want to think about how regions are different, it's actually in the pre-event performance of your events. So for example, in North America, I've seen research shows that most people will register at the last minute for your events. So making sure that you tailor your outreach strategy to meet how people in North America register for events is important versus needing a longer promotional cycle in EMEA. But to that engagement point, and perhaps I've gone on a tangent about registration there, but in event performance is usually more about the industry someone's operating in. So you see different performances for like, if you're doing, and I saw it in the chat earlier, people using webinars to engage with physicians. There's a profile for engagement that is, first of all, compliant with the FDA. That's important. Is different from, when you're attending a webinar for a company like us, where we have chat on, we're allowing engagement, we're taking questions. So more about the marketer that we're marketing to potentially, instead of the fact of where someone is based in the world. So maybe another question I'll take here that just came in from Peyton, but Matt, maybe I'll give this one to you, but how do you help sessions be more engaging and lighter when the content might be more serious and rigid? For example, I work in cybersecurity. All right, so Peyton came out and said it. We have a cybersecurity marketer on our hand, but it might not be the most sexy topic, Peyton says. Any
Well,
tips?
yeah, I mean, oftentimes we're covering topics that are serious, right? I mean, I think this is a serious topic, but we can still have some fun with it. I think in cybersecurity, like depending on like what you're covering, if you're covering sort of best practices, I think you can still allow other people to come in and make that interactive. I think the more I find that for a lot of events, it doesn't get specific enough. So if you're just covering the art of the possible versus sort of giving some case studies and examples of what works, I think is ways to make it not just it's not about making it humorous, right? It's sometimes not even about making it entertaining. It's about making it valuable. Am I going to walk away from this with something useful, right? We often tell sales reps, like in the first call you have with a prospect, I want them to walk away from that call thinking, boy, I would have paid for that. I would have paid for that interaction. I would have paid for that insight. So think about your audience, think about the value of their time. And if we're going to take 45 minutes of your time, how do I make sure that you are getting value from that you are walking away, not just with this conversation, but with the action guides we talked about and with some insights on how to sort of think differently about your segmentation. So just premeditate that part of it. And there may be an entertainment value part of it, but people might be coming just because they want to do their job better. Like deliver on that as well.
Visual, anything you'd add to that?
No, I think you covered it well, Matt. I mean, I think there's a time and place. I've said time and place 3 times now, probably, but I've said, I think there's a time and place for kind of the serious topics as well as kind of keeping it engaging. I think, again, it's the format of how you're doing it too, right? Here, this is kind of me, Cherie, and Matt kind of just talking and riffing off of each other on different ideas, and I think that kind of makes it engaging and taking different questions, having chat enabled, right? I think that's really important in terms of that. That's how I kind of position it.
I like that. And I think the only thing that I would add to it is, don't be afraid, especially, all the marketers on the line who are working with spokespeople internally, don't be afraid to recommend presentation training and coaching. Even if you've been through it 20 years ago, doing a refresher now. There's a lot of different tools and techniques that people can learn. It's a valuable asset, even if you're not presenting on webinars. And I will say most of the trainings I've seen have focused more on the in-person, which of course, there's this whole element of not falling off stage, getting your clicker right, all of that. But enabling your team internally to build confidence. I know that can often be one of the hardest parts is people turning on the camera, being okay that, and I know we had a makeup artist online who was talking about people judging your appearance. So hopefully I don't get an angry comment about how I did my hair today. But I think there's this real like human element behind making presenters be comfortable enough to be as authentic as Matt was mentioning earlier. And while that might feel like outside of the day job of a marketer, I think it really does help build people up for success and get them wanting to do more webinars with you. I think we found that there's an appetite for content out there. And if you can help your spokespeople want to participate with you, it's only going to pay off in the long run when you're walking in and saying, we have something to do in 3 weeks. Are you game to join me for it?
And it's not just the spokespeople that you already sort of enumerated, but I bet you there's people with expertise and interest that could become something like that. I mean, I worked at a real estate tech company, and we had a former real estate broker who was a trainer on the team. She was just out doing training. We started to bring her in to do sort of like expertise webinars, and people loved her. She just had a personality that just did fantastic in a virtual format. We had a client that was doing it was a comp database tool. So basically like, comps on salaries, right? And so they had a PhD in mathematics that had built the algorithm for how the system works. We just started calling him Dr. Salary. And so we invited him onto webinars, and it was sort of a call-in show of like, talk about this salary you have or talk about this position and ask Dr. Salary. Now, we had to teach Dr. Salary not to tell people the history of the watch when people asked him what time, but that was a learning process. But people loved Dr. Salary. He loved doing it. And it had so many win-wins around it. So I think you can be creative in how that happens. I mean, how do you make compensation data sexy? Invent a Dr. Salary.
I got to come up with a nickname for myself. I don't think it's Dr. Salary, but I got to come up with something. That's a good idea. I like that.
Honestly, it's a career limiting move for me to try to come up with one on the fly. So I'm going to go to our last question that we have time for from Lindsay here. So she is interested in post-event or post-webinar strategy, excuse me, aside from the normal follow-up, email on demand promotion, any ideas that have shown good ROI? And maybe I'll go to you first, Rijul, without a nickname.
Yeah, don't give me.
We got options. We got recommendations. We got Dr. Doom, Captain Webinar. I don't know. I'd love to hear what other people think.
No, I think that's a great question, right? And I think we're seeing a lot of different things, right? So just use this as an example. This is a 45-minute webinar, right? And after the event, will people watch the full on demand? Maybe. But our technology, we have an AI content generation which auto chapters the webinar, right? So it says, okay, here, this is Matt talking about Dr. Salary, et cetera. So you can auto chapter kind of the on-demand recording. You can also, leverage AI to create kind of video snippets or a highlight reel from that, right? I think that's really important, right? So you send out a 2-minute highlight reel that goes automatically to LinkedIn or to whatever else, to your market, via email. And that gets people excited about then maybe going and watching that full on-demand recording, right? So I think there's ways to get people to kind of be interested in it. I'll be very honest, and I know this is being recorded, but we have our all hands, even in the internal comms, we have an our all hands, right? So how do I get people interested in watching that after it actually already happened? Well, here's a 2-minute highlight reel of what our CEO said or whatever somebody else said. So those are the ways I think we're seeing that. I think there's actually another question in terms of the AI side. That is kind of how we leverage, AI in terms of Zoom strategy for events and webinars, which is AI content generation, AI video editing, AI, snippets. Ask AI Companion, right? You can go in there and ask a question. You can get caught up with the webinar as well. So I think there's a multitude of things kind of post-webinar, post-event that can be used to really kind of drive that attendance. And again, getting that right content in the hands of the right people at the right time.
And this is part of your process and workflow, right? Develop this up front so that it can be followed by all every time you do something. I mean, this, I know we're timed to AI, right? But I think there's so many interesting tools. Like Opus is a great one. You can throw your video in, and you can go and you can decide what snippets you want to do, or you can just say, you figure it out. Find the places that are most interesting and create snippets, and it'll just create a bunch of snippets for you. We have a trained GPT that we use internally that takes, content from some things like this and says, like, create me a bunch of LinkedIn snippets, create me some social snippets and highlights, give me a couple infographics on what was talked about today that we can go and use. And what it generates needs to be edited and curated a little bit, but you can take what would be hours of work that you may or may not have time to do down to a few minutes and have some amazing assets that you can leverage after the event.
That's great. And on the point of time, I will try to keep us relatively on track. So maybe Rajul, Matt, if you can go, what your big takeaway, the thing you would leave our audience with here today.
Yeah, so maybe I'll go first. So I guess what I would say is the one thing after this webinar is really sit down with your team and map out every step of your event workflow, the before, the during, the after. Think about who you're trying to target. Think about how you want your attendees to feel both before, during, and after the event. And then kind of figure out who owns what parts and what tools they use. I promise you'll find at least a couple places where you're losing time and data. And again, I think it's just important to kind of map out your overall event strategy as part of your overall marketing strategy as well.
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of things we talked about here. Pick a couple that you're going to go really commit to implement and get in place, sooner versus later, and build a process and workflow for how that happens. Like, get that documented, get that published, make sure that's something that everyone on your team can leverage and use, so that you're not reinventing it for every time you do this. It's great if you do at great follow-up from a particular event. It's even better if you do it for all of your events, and that capability is right in front of you.
The takeaway I'll leave everyone with is back to measurement. And I want to see everyone be super successful in their roles in 2026. So go back to making sure that you're documenting what you're looking to get out of the event so that you can, do that internal promotion of when events are successful, but also be able to say when it wasn't successful, or maybe we chose the wrong metrics to measure this webinar by. Like, turns out it's more customers than net new prospects. Like, let's adjust our strategy, learn from it, so that we can all just keep making better webinars in 2026. So I want to thank Rajul and Matt for joining me here today. I see all the heart emojis coming in. I know I had a blast. I love working with you both, which is why I didn't come up with a nickname on the fly. But I also want to thank our audience. This was such great engagement. I'm so sorry that if we didn't get to your questions. I see that there's more than a handful here. We'll get back to you for the questions that were dropped in here. We'll go back through the chat as well and see if there's anything that we missed. But don't forget, be on the lookout from a follow-up from us that will have some of that content that Matt talked about that's really practical and pragmatic, worksheets for you to print out or work on digitally. Make sure you download any resources that you want from today's session before we close out. But overall, thank you for joining today, your engagement, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.